decide to go off to bed. And while laying in your tent, you hear what sounds like several large, bipedal creatures coming into your camp. They push down on your tent, they pee on your tent, they start to throw things around the campsite. That's what happened to my first guest tonight. I'm going to be speaking with Chris, and he's from Nevada. He was out with his stepdad the first night. Later on during the trip, they had a friend join them. But listen real carefully as Chris tells us what happened. Chris, I want to welcome you to the show. I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be talking to you.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, prior to your guys' encounter, did you have a knowledge of Sasquatch? Did you have a knowledge of these creatures?
The only knowledge I had of them was from a few TV shows I'd seen. The Patterson Gimlin film was about it. Never really thought much about it. I was the guy that thought, there was one of them, and, if it was true at all. I don't know why I thought that. It just didn't seem really relevant to me.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, had that misconception, and that's all right to have that misconception about there being one. If it's not in your daily life, you don't really think too much of it. But you're a pretty experienced outdoorsman. You're a hunter. You've been out in the woods a lot. You know what's out there, or you thought you knew what was out there.
Yeah.
If you would take us back to that night that you guys were surrounded in your camp, it was you and your stepdad, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us what happened. Tell us what you guys were doing, and then walk us into the encounter if you would.
No problem. It was August 6th, 2014. My stepdad had an archery tag in northern Elko County for a mule deer. We left Reno that morning. It's about a 6-hour drive. We got there in the mid-afternoon. We drove around, did some scouting for a few hours. We were about 4 days early for the season. And he'd never been there, so we just drove around. I really wanted to show him a lot of the area. I'd been there. This had been my third year in that area. We got back to camp, I want to say around 7:30 that night, and set up just a quick camp, just something to keep the rain off of us because it had been raining out there a lot. So we threw a tarp over the trailer that we towed his Polaris Ranger out there on. And we were going to sleep under that on our cots. And we got that all set up. We had dinner, and then we went to bed. But I'm sorry, before I go any further, I'm going to leave some things out if I don't slow down. When we first got there, there was, I guess you just call it your classic-looking tree break. It was right on the side of the road pointing in toward the camp. It wasn't a large tree, but big enough to where it probably would have took a couple guys to snap it. It was 2 or 3 inches in diameter, and it was an aspen, and they're pretty flexible when they're that small. So, yeah, I really didn't think anything about it. I saw it, and I'd seen things on tree breaks and stuff prior to that, and I thought it was weird because it didn't look that old. The leaves on it had died, but they were still all attached. And in the rain, I was thinking they probably should have fallen off, but, it was there in the back of my mind. But anyway, we go into dark, and it being, we were going to climb into bed, and it was right about 9 o'clock. I've had a previous experience in 2012 where something walked in, and it was in a bear camp we had in the Sierras, and I could hear it walking around, and I didn't have my gun or my flashlight on me at the time. So ever since then, I'm real adamant about having my gun and my flashlight on me when I go to bed. So I climbed out of bed. I went over to the truck to get my gun and my flashlight I left in there. And there were thunderstorms surrounding us, but not right on top of us. So every now and then there would be flashes of lightning that would just kind of light up the area where you could see just a little bit. And when I was right in front of the truck door, there was a flash of lightning, and I was looking up toward the road. And, it could be just the way the shadows hit and what I saw, but, what happened after that, I'm kind of leaning towards it actually being something. I saw just a silhouetted figure of what looked like a hairy man standing in the road. Looked like he was walking from right to left, and he had his left arm out in front, and I could see one of the legs sticking out, but you could see hair sticking off these things. And it had This one had a real conical shape to the head in the profile view I saw. And like I said, it might have been nothing. Could have just been my imagination, but kind of leaning towards it being actually happening. That freaked me out. So all of a sudden I saw that, and then it went dark. So I drove into the truck, got my light, shined it up there. There's nothing there. I looked around. I couldn't see any tracks or anything. So I figured, you're letting your mind get you with the tree being over there and all that. Just go to bed, go to sleep, forget about it. So I climbed back in. I picked up my phone to see what time it was, because I was going to set my alarm for the morning. We were going to get up around 5. And I set my alarm, and before I clicked my phone off, I remember the phone saying 9:02. I remember thinking, okay, plenty of good sleep, time ahead, and all that. So I set it down. I'm laying there just listening. I'm going to say 10, maybe 15 minutes tops after I did that. I started hearing, I don't want to say footsteps. There was something outside, and it was mushing around in the mud, so I guess you could call it footsteps. But there was nobody else around for miles. There was nobody out there but us. So I'm thinking, deer. There's a lot of deer in this area. And they have cows that they run through these allotments during this time of the year. And they've been in there in previous years, so I'm not really thinking a whole lot of it. But it just sounds like it's trying to be sneaky, and that kind of bothers me.
Now, when you say it sounded like it was trying to be sneaky, what do you mean by that?
It sounded like it was large. It didn't sound small. And I mean, I know small things can sound huge out in the woods. I understand that, but it would sound like it was being really methodical in the way it was moving, and it was just like kind of like me or you would move around if we were trying to not be noisy. Because I mean, you hear deer and any other animal move around the woods, and for the most part, if it's not a predator, it's really not trying to be that sneaky.
You felt like it was moving with direction, like it was on a mission or something. But
it felt like it had a plan, like it was coming in on us. I don't know how better to explain it. It didn't feel right. It didn't seem like anything else. And like I said, I had a previous experience where something walked in like that. So this is playing on my mind. So, I mean, I'm nervous already. It eventually worked up right behind my head, where I was laying on the trailer. And when I say right behind my head, I'm talking 2 feet behind my head. It was right there. If the tarp wasn't there, I could have reached out and grabbed it. I'm sitting there just kind of wondering, what the hell's going on? I got my gun. I'm really not too worried, but it has me concerned. The clouds kind of drifted off for the night, and the moon had come out. And I could see up through the tarp. The tarp was illuminated now, and you couldn't really see things through the tarp. I mean, you could see the trees swoosh back and forth every now and then that we were under, but it was light. I kept noticing something. It was moving across the top, but it didn't look like a tree limb. And I really didn't think much of it. I thought, it's got to be a tree. I mean, the tarp where it was at, it was up there. It was above my head. It was right around 7 feet. So I'm thinking there's nothing waving around out there other than the tree. So, I closed my eyes. I couldn't fall asleep. A few more minutes went by. So I'm just staring out there watching, the moonlight on the tarp. The tarp starts to press down toward the center of my chest and stops about 6 inches from the center of my chest. So that really freaks me out. I'm thinking, that's not normal at all. And without even thinking, I reached up with my left hand and I smacked it. And I hit something that was very firm. It seemed very large. And when I did that, it immediately pulled back. And when it did that, I kind of did that noise like, ugh, just not real loud, but it startled me. When that happened, whatever was behind me smacked the tarp behind my head. Then that really scared the crap out of me. So I made some more noise.
Now, you can't see outside of this tarp, right?
No, I could see light coming in, but I couldn't see anything outside the tarp.
What did you think it was? What was going through your mind?
Oh, man. I hate to say I jumped right toward Sasquatch or Bigfoot, but with some of the stuff I've come across in the past, I found quite a few footprints, actually. I was leaning towards that. There was nothing else out there big enough that could have come down like that on top. I mean, unless something jumped onto the tarp from the tree, like they had tree frogs out there, but there was none that were around, and what I hit was not the size of any tree frog I've ever seen. So, I hadn't seen anything yet. It was just really freaking me out.
Yeah,
I was thinking Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Yeah, and that's okay to say that. I mean, I was just curious what was going through your mind. I would imagine you're freaking out at this point. What happened next?
After that, there were kind of like two of them that came moving in. The one was still behind my head. I mean, it shuffled back. It sounded like a little bit, but not very far. It moved around. Then, kind of like two of them came up behind my stepdad. And you could hear multiple, they weren't trying to be quiet about it. They just kind of walked in and you could hear them squishing around. And they started shaking the tarp behind him. And this guy, he could sleep through just about anything. Nothing wakes him up. Short of, getting hit by something or the house being on fire, something like that.
Atomic bomb going off.
Yeah, nothing was really bothering him.
Yeah. No, I've been out with guys like that. That's why I laugh.
Yeah, I was actually trying to wake him up several times throughout this, and when I would make any kind of noise, calling out his name or moving to try and reach up to get him, because he was about 8 feet away from me on his trailer, so I couldn't just reach over and shake him. Anytime I would make any kind of noise or he would start to snore a little bit, they would ramp up what they were doing. They would shake the tarp more. They would swat at it a little bit. Once in a while, you could hear a heavy breathing, not like a growl, but you could hear like a but really, really low. And it just sounded like someone breathing heavy in and out. When I tried to wake him up the first time, the two I figured that were behind him kind of shuffled over to the corner of the trailer where they were kind of diagonally off of his right shoulder. So now I'm figuring there's 3 outside from what I can hear. And what lets me know that there was 3 is one of them from that corner moved around to the other front corner that was up by his foot, and they were pulling on both ends of the tarp, one after the other. So I knew there were 2 over there, and I knew the one probably had moved from behind my head. So that's how I come up with 3. After a while, and I can't tell you how much time went by, the whole thing took about an hour and a half from the time we got into the truck here in a little bit, but I mean, it probably happened in 10 or 15 minute intervals where things would happen. But you would get real quiet and you'd think maybe they snuck away, but then they would do something and it would let you know they were still there. I can't remember what I did. I did something to try and wake up my stepdad. And this was probably, I'm going to say, halfway through the whole ordeal. But it pissed him off. I either called out his name pretty loud, or I think I moved on my cot and it squeaked, made like a metal noise, but the one that was behind me, I heard it back up very plainly. And we had a pile of firewood that was over by the truck, between us and the truck. I'd say it was 10 yards away. And what we had for firewood up there, we brought these cedar 4x4 posts we had that our neighbor had given us. And we were going to use that to start fire since everything out there had pretty much been soaked for the previous week of us coming out. It had rained a lot up there for some reason that year. It was really uncharacteristic of the area. But we brought some dry wood out so we could start fire. They started throwing around the 4x4 posts. They started throwing around the posts, and you could hear them banging out there. There was a little rock pile about 30 yards from the road. And I could hear the posts banging off the rocks. You could hear wood banging back and forth. That was really starting to freak me out. During this whole time, I'm sitting there. I've got my gun, clutched with both hands. I've got it pretty much pointed up directly behind my head while I'm trying to lay as still as possible. I've got, tears coming from my eyes. My nose is running, and I'm trying not to make any kind of a sound. And I'm physically starting to shake. I have no problem saying that that's what happened. After that happened, it got quiet again, and I heard it walk up behind me again. And as soon as it stopped, it started to urinate. It just started to pee. And if anyone has ever heard a horse or a bull pee, that is the kind of volume I'm talking about. It sounded like that. I I know it was pee. It wasn't water coming off the top of the tarp. You could hear it start and stop a few times when it got down to the end. That really put fear into me like I've never had. I really don't know why that did, but it just let me know that something was very, very wrong, if all the other stuff didn't already.
So it started peeing on the tarp?
It didn't pee on the tarp this time. It was just kind of off to the side. I'm going to say off to the left of the tarp. I could hear it hitting the ground. Yeah, it did that. It stopped. And then it just went quiet. Eerie quiet. I mean, during this whole time, normally you hear things out there at night. You hear birds chirping, crickets, something. It was just that eerie, dead quiet. Some more time went by. I tried waking my stepdad up again. They swatted the tarp a few more times, things like that. Pretty much accomplished nothing other than scaring the crap out of me. Then, out of nowhere, from in front of me, it sounded like little pebbles, little clods of dirt, I found out from the next morning, were being tossed at the tarp, and they were hitting the vertical wall of the tarp and not the top. There was actually quite a few that were being thrown in. So I've got 3 that are behind me and on my right side, and now there's at least one more, I figure, across the creek that we were right on throwing stuff at the tarp. I tried waking my stepdad up one more time. Still nothing. I could hear more heavy breathing, and they swatted the tarp some more.
Did you ever consider shooting?
Oh, yeah, it was on my mind. And I know the few people I've told the story to that were my friends, they all say the same thing. That, why didn't you shoot? I didn't shoot because I felt it hadn't escalated enough, and with the amount of the creatures that were there, it probably wouldn't have done any good, especially with one guy still asleep having no idea what was going on. I figured if I did pull the trigger at the one that was behind my head that I figured was there, and I hit it, and I didn't kill it, or I did kill it, what are the other ones going to do? I mean, they're either going to run away, or they're going to lay into us, and the poor guy that isn't even awake isn't going to have a clue and wouldn't have a fair chance at, defending himself. So that's why I didn't do anything.
Yeah, and I think you made the right decision not shooting. I just asked if, I was just curious if it crossed your mind or not.
I've taken a lot of crap over not shooting.
Well, I think you're right. I think it hasn't gotten to the point to where you are in a position where you have no other option. It just hasn't gotten to that. Even though you're scared, it's freaking you out. Like you said, you pop off a couple shots, you hit something. Well, what if you piss something off and it comes back and, like you said, your stepdad's still snoring away? I think it's reckless, and you know this from being a hunter, just to start blasting outside of a tarp you can't see because of fear, as opposed to being more level-headed about it like you were. I would imagine if they start lifting up the tarp and start grabbing for you, then it's time to start blasting,
Oh, yeah, if something would have came in and I felt something grab at us, I would have started shooting in a heartbeat. But like I said, it wasn't that time yet. I didn't feel it was that time. And I mean, people can say what they want to about it, but until you're in that position, I'd just like to see how other people would react in the same position. But, badmouth me for not taking a shot at something I couldn't see in the dark with multiple things there. But like you said, it's not smart.
Yeah, no, I think it's reckless to shoot unless you're in a position where you absolutely have to. Like I said, you might make a bad situation worse. You're in your tarp at this point. They've come back. They're swatting at the tarp. You can hear them walking around. They're knocking over firewood. It seems like they're messing with the firewood. They're coming back. Now they're throwing, you said little dirt balls, or what you thought were pebbles, but it seemed to be more like dirt, at the tarp. And what happened next?
It went quiet for a couple minutes again. For this period of time, it went quiet for what I feel was the longest period of time. So I started gaining my composure back. The ones that were on the corner seemed like they kind of shuffled off back. I never heard the one behind me move, but I figured, maybe it moved back. It just was quiet for too long. It hadn't been quiet that long yet. So I started trying to wake my stepdad up again to let him know what's going on. and I was quite a bit louder this time about it. Well, when I, after he didn't wake up, I was going to physically get out of my sleeping bag and go over and shake him and wake him up. Well, I was just about to pull the sleeping bag back where the zipper would make noise, and I never got that far, and it started peeing again behind me. It started peeing in the dirt, and then it swung up, and it started to pee on the tarp. When it did that, I about went through the top of the tarp. I had lost it, and I had this rake that I just remembered about that was next to me. It was a little 3.5 foot, I call it like a little kid's rake. And I had it in the tarp in case it had come on to raining again so I could push any water off if I woke up during the night and it was really starting to sag down. I forgot about this thing until this point, so I grabbed it and I just threw it towards my stepdad. And it hit his arm, it hit the cot, and then it bounced off of him in the cot and hit the edge of the trailer, just making a hell of a metal clanging noise. And it woke him up, and he came to, and while he's coming to, the one that was behind me, I heard definitely back up. It backed up several feet, and it kind of made a real heavy breathing noise into almost a real guttural low growl that you could very hardly audibly make out. But I felt it just, I don't know if it was me being scared or what, but I just felt it go through me. I just got the chills, and it felt like it reverberated in my chest, and just really scared the crap out of me. So I just started yelling for my stepdad, and he woke up and he was wondering why the hell I had just hit him with a rake, you know, what was going on. I told him everything that was going on, and I told him these things were outside. And him being in his half-shaved sleep state still, reaches for his flashlight, reaches for his gun, and in order for him to get out of this tarp setup we had, he had to climb over the top of me to come out my side because we closed his side completely off. So he's doing that, and I'm sitting there, you know, I'm like, what are you doing? You know, you're freaking nuts. Don't go out there. And he's like, whatever. He's the kind of guy that if something we got to get him, then it's going to happen, and he can't do anything about it anyway. At least that's what he told me after the fact of this all. So he really didn't give a crap, you know. He thought I was just, I don't know. He saw the state I was in, and he was like, well, whatever, something we got to be up there, so let's go confront it, I guess. So he flew him out. He had a pair of shorts on. I had my underwear and a pair of socks on. I grabbed my gun and my flashlight and I followed him out because I'm not letting him go out there alone. I figured that probably would have been really bad. Because during this whole time, I kept figuring that maybe they were trying to get us to come out of the car. Like, I really didn't know. That's kind of the vibe I got off the whole ordeal. Like they either wanted us to leave or come out. And that's why I never went out there on my own. But we went out there. I'm immediately looking at the ground. We shined around. They had taken off. They had snuck away. They were in the woodline. There's a creek that runs through there, and there's these real thick aspen trees and some lower alder brush and stuff in there. And they had gotten back in there. I could hear them moving around, but you couldn't see them. But all around the campsite, you know, our firewood was tossed everywhere. And I started looking at the ground, and there were footprints all over the place. 5-toed, big footprints. And there was roughly an 18-inch one that was behind my head and a set there. So 2 sets behind my stepdad, like I had figured. There was a 13 and a 15-inch one over there. And later that morning, we found an 11-inch one over in the woodline. But, so yeah, that confirmed basically what I was thinking too. There were giant 5-toed footprints out here, and the 13-inch footprint, before I forget, looked like it had either long nails or claws coming out the end of it. It looked a little different than the rest of them. Don't know why. That's what it looked like.
What did your stepdad say when he saw the footprints?
When he started seeing them, it seemed like he saw the demeanor of me. I was just freaking out, you know, almost, you know, I was in a state of panic, almost in like a point of shock. And then we were looking at these prints, and he's just looking like, what in the hell is going on? You know, you could see the wheels in his head turning, like, what the fuck is going on? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but
you're right.
Yeah, he had a can't hear all that well. I mean, so all the stuff I heard moving in the brush and everything, he wasn't hearing. And I kept telling him, they're in the brush right now. They're 15 yards away in the brush. I can hear them moving through there. You can hear twigs and stuff popping and moving around. And while I'm telling him that, and we just keep looking into the brush, we start getting hit by these little pebbles. They're, let's say the biggest one was probably maybe the size of a marble. But we started getting hit by stuff like that. And there were a few chunks of old bark that came out and stuff. And that just added to his confusion even more. And, you know, I was telling him before that they were throwing stuff at the tarp. And this is all taking place really fast. I mean, from the time we got out of the tarp, having stuff thrown at us and looking at the prints was probably 2 minutes. And when that started happening, we're both quiet. We're just looking, trying to figure out where exactly it's coming from. We both have our guns and our flashlights out. If anything comes out, we're going to, you know, shoot at it at this point. It just felt really bad. But they stopped throwing stuff, and we backed up behind the tarp, and we're looking around and just surveying the whole thing. And we walk over by the truck, and when we get over by the truck, it's parked pretty much right up against the wood line to where to fully open the passenger door, it had to hit one of the bushes that started the wood line. And I'm going to say 7 to 10 yards inside the wood line from where the truck was. The aspen trees that are farther back in they're big. They're probably 35, 40 feet tall. They just start shaking like someone just shake like me or you shaking a thin sapling. They just start violently shaking, and the bushes and everything around there just start shaking like crazy. We kind of looked at each other, and I just said, you know, I don't want to be here anymore. And the only thing he said was get in the truck. So we drove in the truck, and we got the hell out of there that night.
Where did you guys go? Did you head home after that?
We just, it drove me nuts because he just, like, pretty much idled out of there. He didn't drive fast. He didn't get out of there. I wanted to pull the Dukes of Hazzard, get the hell out of there, and he drove real slow. So we drove out. We were probably 6 or 7 miles from the nearest paved road we were back in on. It probably took us 10 minutes to get out that far, or no, probably longer. But, yeah, once we got back out to the road, there's a reservoir nearby. And once you go right across the paved road, you're into this, you go into the state park area that's there. And they have a camping area and stuff there. Nobody was there. And he just kind of drove around this parking lot for probably 15 or 20 minutes, just like kind of circling. Then we stopped, and the state I was in at this point, I was just shaking and really not paying attention to much, and I still had my gun. And he wanted to get my gun away from me because I guess I looked just really shook up and bad. He didn't get it. I took the bullet out of the chamber, and he was okay at that point. But after that, we started talking, and we had to go up to this town the next morning. He wanted to get a tube of silicone to seal the roof of his Ranger because it leaked pretty bad. It wasn't sealed tight, so when it rained, we would just get like a waterfall that went down our back. And that was about 30 miles away. So we drove into the town, and we parked in a dirt lot that was next to the store, and we spent the rest of the night there. Tried to sleep in the truck.
And what was your conversation with your stepdad at that point? I would assume that you filled him in on everything that was going on while he was sleeping.
There wasn't really much of a conversation. I told him what happened. I don't want to say he's a different guy. He just doesn't really, even though he saw what he saw, it's like he just wrote it off. You know, he doesn't like to hear about it. You know, we don't talk about it. Like I said, I went over what happened when I calmed down a little bit. And we basically said, well, I guess we'll try and sleep here, and we'll see what we find when we go back in the morning when the sun's up.
So you guys head back the next morning. What did you find at the camp?
We went back the next morning. We got there, let's say, probably about 7:45. The sun was up. I was expecting to find the camp something wrong, like tarp torn down. Half expecting to find the Ranger that we left there flipped over. You know, there was a bunch of things going through my mind. I expected to find it pretty trashed. pull in, and other than the firewood being tossed around like it was the night before, everything was exactly how we left it.
Did you guys decide to stay another night, or did you leave at that point?
We packed up and we left that campsite. And I was hoping to get some pictures of the footprints in the morning, but about 3 o'clock in the morning, it came on raining really heavy again there. It didn't completely wash them away, but it looked like just a bunch of people had walked around in the campsite. I caught a lot of flack over not having pictures of the footprints too. But yeah, there was nothing definitive about that. It was just a bunch of big footprints that, you know, looked like a human could have done it and slid around. That was basically it.
Prior to you guys leaving then, it's daytime now, and you actually saw one of the creatures.
Yeah, I saw it 35 yards from me on a little ridge. We had just packed up all our stuff. You know, we were throwing things in the truck. We weren't being quiet about it. We had the hitch for the truck on the Ranger to remove the trailer back in a little ways where we couldn't get it in with the truck. So I had to get the hitch out once we pulled the trailer out. And there was a lot of mud in it, so I was pounding on that. So it was just echoing everywhere. I had this little 3-pound hammer I was hitting with, and it was just making a hell of a noise. So if anything was around, it had known that we had come back. So I don't know if that's why I saw it or not, but we were making a lot of noise. So we get everything loaded on the trailer into the truck. I'm going to drive the Ranger out, and he's going to follow me because I know where I'm going. He doesn't. And that way we're not towing all that weight on the trailer and the really muddy conditions that were there. So I took up the last ice chest I'm putting on the trailer. I set it down on the back of the trailer. I turn around to my right to face my stepdad. He was saying something to me, and I was turning around to talk to him. And as I do that, and I square up on him, out of the top right corner of my eye, kind of out of my peripheral, I could see just a little bit of movement on the hill. So I look up that way, and there's this very large humanoid-looking figure. To me, it looked like it was squatted down behind the brush, and the brush up there was very tall. And I could see from, let's say, halfway between his waist and his pectoral muscle on up to the top of his head. It was probably twice as wide as me. The muscles were very defined. It was completely covered in hair. It was probably 4 or 5 inches long, maybe. It wasn't real long, but it wasn't real short either. It was just staring right at me. It moved, and I don't know if it wanted us to see it, but I mean, it put itself in the most vulnerable position that you could put yourself in for being seen. It was on this small little ridge. Nothing. It was skylining itself. Nothing but blue sky behind it. It was one of the easiest things to see out in the wild. You just don't do that. And if they're smart at all, I think they would know that. But so that's kind of why I think maybe it wanted us to see it, to, you know, push us out of the area, I guess, maybe, was my thought. But anyway, it had just these piercing black-looking eyes. They were either really dark brown or black-looking. The nose, I remember the nose very vividly. Yeah, it was really wide. And other than being, if you just took one of, like our nose, and you just smashed it back in flat and widened it out, it looked a lot like that. I couldn't see any ears. It had a very wide, just bulky-looking jaw to it. I couldn't really make out a mouth. If where I figured it might have been down a little lower than maybe mine or yours. It just didn't have that little gap between the nose and like the upper lip, how me and you looked.
Between the nose and the mouth, was that area longer?
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me. It seemed like there was a pretty good gap in there. Because below the nose, it didn't have any kind of like a mustache like me or you would have if we had a beard. It had more of, I call it the Amish beard. It just didn't have a mustache, and it didn't have hair kind of going up very high on the cheeks. I could very plainly see the skin color. It was, I don't want to call it gray, but it wasn't brown either. It was kind of a mixture of the both. It looked, I call it like a buckskin color, but it wasn't dark at all. It stood out very well. The color of the hair on the chest, where it was shaded over from the sun, not hitting it. The sun was back up to, would have been here left, and it from everything I could tell, it was a male. It didn't have any kind of female characteristics to it that I could see. The hair color on the chest, it looked like a dark chocolate brown, I would say, and where it was shadowed. And then you get up on the shoulder, and on the top of the shoulder where the sun was highlighting the hair, it had a very blonde appearance to it. Then you got down below that, and it was more of a cinnamon, kind of a burnt auburn color. It had a tinge of red to it. So there were 3 different colors I could see on this thing. And I don't know if that was just from the way the light hit it. I'm assuming that's what it was.
You see that a lot with when the sun is hitting like a deer or an elk, especially when the sunlight's coming off their back. It almost looks like they're a different color, even though that they're not. And I think what it's doing, it's bringing underneath some of the colors from underneath. So you probably did get that, trying to figure out what color is this thing, from top down because of the sunlight.
Yeah, and I have the same thing. I have a dog. He's black. In the house and in the shade, he was black. He was out in the sun, and there's a very distinct brown color to him. So I figured gotta be something like that. But that the glare coming off there's a glare coming off the shoulder where it was blonde. That also caught my eye really, really heavy. And he was only there for a good 3 or 3.5 seconds. Because I saw him when I looked up in the right corner of my eye, and then when I saw what was there, I turned my head and really squared up on it. And when I did that, it really squatted down behind the brush, turned its whole body to its right, and just shot up this little ravine for probably 30 yards and over into this little drainage area. And I could no longer see it. I don't know if it was running on 2 legs or if it was on all 4s. I'm going to assume it was on all 4s because of the size of this thing looked like it had to it. But it was very fast. It covered that distance in probably 2 seconds.
And you're turning to actually tell your stepdad, right? He didn't have a chance to actually look up there.
No, his whole back was to this. He saw the look on my face when I turned and I squared up on it. I guess my mouth was open, and I was talking to him, and I just stopped. I guess I just froze. And he kind of said, "What's wrong?" And I remember I just pointed up to the hill. I didn't say anything, and he turned around, and when it took off, it hit one of the sagebrush bushes. And it was shaking it, and he heard it. And when he turned around, he saw the bush moving, and he just kind of looked back to me like, well, what was it? And I was like, that thing, it looked like a giant monkey type thing. I'm like, just imagine what a Bigfoot looks like. And there you go. I just saw one. I couldn't believe it.
The facial descriptions you give reminds me of, it was episode 110 when I had the hunter on who shot one. It was the same type of facial descriptions. Did you notice any facial expressions?
It just, to me, it just had this blank stare. Just really didn't have any expression at all. It was just staring. It seemed just a cold, blank stare. I didn't see any teeth. It didn't look like it smiled or anything like that. It was just a very cold, blank stare is the only way I can describe it.
So what happened next after that?
After that, I thought about going up there real quick. I was like, should we go with it? And he was just like, if you really want to. I was like, yeah, no, let's get the hell out of here. And we took off and we went to the campsite.
There's so much to this whole encounter, almost like they were messing with you, peeing next to you, then peeing on the tarp and messing with your campsite. That's pretty ballsy behavior, really.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And the only thing I could figure why it might have peed on us, when I went over to look at that tree that I said was broken, I peed next to it. Maybe they were watching and they got pissed about that. Because I don't hear too many stories about them peeing on people's stuff in campsites. I have heard about it, but it just seemed odd. And I didn't think about that until several weeks later. I thought, oh man, maybe that's why they did that. But they wanted at us or they wanted us out of there. It was one of the two. And we left, so they got us out of there. But
yeah, it sounds like a terrifying night, especially with the thunder and lightning going on the night before.
Oh, it was without a doubt the scariest night of my life.
Oh, I bet.
Nothing comes even close.
I bet. Just everything that happened that night. In a lot of these situations, a lot of times if you don't leave you're in bigger trouble. Usually it escalates. The whole situation will escalate. The peeing is interesting. That you peed in that area before, and so it goes to pee. It's kind of like watching a dog. One dog pees on a bush. If you have any other dogs that are around, they all have to pee on that same bush. It's almost a dominance. It's a dominance display in the animal kingdom. So instead of going home, a lot of people I think would have been like, I am out of here, after seeing something like that.
Oh, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
But I really didn't have a choice in the matter. So.
No, and I know your stepdad, he wanted to stay and hunt, and I know a lot of times when you're along for the ride, if you're with someone, you just kind of have to go with it. You guys went 10 miles away from that camp. Did anything happen?
We had, there was several other nights. Like I said, we were in the area for 12 days. I'm going to say there was probably 7 other nights where I feel that they came around. 2 nights after we got there, my friend Mike, he also had that same tag, and he drove out there. We showed up on Wednesday. He showed up on Friday, and we were in the campground by then. And that night, when he showed up, he was one of the few people I told about my prior experiences finding footprints and stuff. But I called him the day before he was supposed to come out, and I actually told him to bring a shotgun and a bunch of slugs because of what had happened. And he was like, yeah, okay, I'll bring it. He showed up without it, so I was pissed off, and he started giving me a bunch of crap about, being freaked out over nothing and all that stuff. But that trip, some of the things that happened, I think changed his mind about it, because the night he showed up, he got there right as the sun was going down. He came to camp. We ate dinner. My stepdad went to bed, and me and him sat around the fire after we got him all set up. And we were in this campground by ourselves at this point. Something was just sneaking around the camp. You could hear it walking around. It distinctly sounded like it was on 2 feet. Really wasn't trying to hide the noise it was making. It sounded like at points, either that or it was just screwing up on what it was doing. And unlike my stepdad, he can hear, and he heard everything I heard. So it was probably 30 to 40 minutes of this. The fire had died down, the moon had come up, and it was almost a full moon at this point. So you could see just 1,000 times better without the fire. You could see what was going on around for the most part. We never saw anything moving around, but it had circled the camp several times at this point, probably 3 or 4 times. So we would just start scanning the tree lines, and we were in this big grove of aspens, so we had probably a 15-yard radius of empty campsite where there were no trees, and then everything outside of us was just pretty dense aspen, alder, and some other brush. We would just start scanning the trees wherever we heard noise with the flashlight. And I didn't see it at first. Mike just all of a sudden yelled. He's like, stop, go back. So I go back, and he's like, right there. And he's yelling. He's like, can you see that? What are you talking about? And I kind of leaned over. There was a tree in my way. And there's these 2 big, greenish, yellow-looking eyes that were up on the side of this tree behind this bush that looked to be about 7 or 8 feet up off the ground. And we just froze and were looking at it, and I didn't see it happen at first. He's like, they just blinked. I'm like, are you sure? And then it did it again, and I saw it happen. I'm like, okay, they blinked. But these eyes, they were a little bit bigger. They looked a little bit bigger than golf balls. They were no more than 15 yards away from us. And like I said, they blinked, and the spacing between them was a good 6 to probably 8 or 9 inches apart. I'm going to say 6 inches at a minimum. They had very good spacing between them. And I know people talk about seeing owls on trees and stuff like that. There was no owl. I don't know what the hell it was. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know what it was, but there was no knowing what it was at the time. But we stood up and we're looking at it after it blinked twice, and then it sounded like it just turned around and it just tore off through the brush and just made a hell of a noise crashing through there. And then once it cleared the trees, we stopped hearing it. That happened 2 nights after the whole main ordeal with the tarp and all that. And I went over there the next morning, and there's kind of a ditch depression, like a little drainage area that goes down behind the tree in the bush that he was standing there at. And I was standing there, and we had a tape measure. Mike had one in his truck, and I raised the tape up to where he could remember the eyes being, and it was over the top of this bush. And it was just a little bit over the top of the bush, so I had a clue where to go to. And I got it up there, and when he told me to stop, where the eyes were at was right at 8.5 feet. And I mean, there was grass back there, and it had been smashed down. You couldn't make it any print, but something had been there, and we never walked back there. And it was freshly smashed down. And it creeped us out a little bit.
Yeah, I would imagine owls don't tear the forest up as they turn and leave an area, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how many. There were so many little things that happened like that after that. We never saw eyes again. But we would hear things creeping around outside. And at one point, the campground filled up quite a bit on the weekend, on Saturday night, Sunday, and into Monday. There was quite a bit of guys that had come up out of the town of Elko. And it's only a little more than an hour out of there. They come up for the weekend and just hunt the weekend. And there's RV access in there. You can park an RV. So they all come in there with their RVs. One night, one guy showed up around, let's say it was about 2:45 in the morning, and I had woke up. I slept 2 hours a night out there max, if I was lucky. I heard him drive in. I heard the diesel truck go by. And I heard something creeping around outside again. And it just sounded like a guy and his wife. They were a couple hundred yards away, and they were backing in. And whatever was around us, I heard distinctly walk off on 2 legs and went toward them. And it was probably about 20 minutes. It was quiet. And they got set up. Everything went quiet over there. And then I heard it walk back to us. And it just hung out until 4:30 or 4:45 in the morning when the sun was coming up. And then it took off. There were several nights that happened. But there was one night after, I believe it was the night after what I just told you happened with that guy coming into camp. It had come in again, and it always sounded like just one, but I'm very wary on thinking that there's just one around. I'm sure there's more. It had come up just a little bit closer, it felt this time. Me and Mike were both hearing it. His tent was a couple yards behind where we were at. And I was just talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I can hear that. And I don't know if it was us talking or if it was trying to communicate somehow with another one, or because we were talking it did this, but it started banging. It's kind of like 2 pieces of wood together. Just clack, 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 clack. And then it did it really fast, like clack, 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 clack. And then it went silent. I was thinking, okay, and I'm talking to Mike, I'm like, did you hear that? And then it did a few more of those. Mike was just like, I've had enough. I'm like, yeah, me too. I started yelling at it. I'm yelling every obscenity I could think of at this thing, get the hell out of here. I'm not going to go into it, but, yeah, we were yelling at the thing. And, sounded like it stood up, walked off, and it sounded like it was pissed off. I mean, it was stomping. I thought I felt the ground shake underneath, because it was very close. Walked off a few yards, and you just heard this incredibly loud bang. It sounded like a rifle went off. Well, we went over there the next morning, and come to find out, it had busted an aspen tree. It was 10 inches in diameter. It had snapped this thing off. It was probably 20 feet tall. Just snapped it like a twig. And it took off. But the aspen tree breaking was so loud that it actually woke my stepdad up, and he asked us if we were shooting our guns. We're like, no, we're not shooting our gun. I said, what the hell's wrong with you? But, yeah, that was the other big event that happened. Mike left after that. We stayed for a few more days. Something just sounded like it was creeping around the camp, and that's pretty much it.
Do you still go out and hunt? I mean, does it worry you being out there?
I worry more about being out there. I used to be the kind of guy that would go out there by myself and not worry about it. I got my gun. I got my stuff. I'm self-sufficient. I'm not worried about it. Now, I don't go out there alone. I'll still go out and hunt. I mean, I'm always going to do that unless something really bad happens, and I can't do it. I just won't go alone. There's no way I'll ever go alone again.
Yeah, no, I always recommend that no one ever goes alone, Not only Sasquatch can get you, but a lot of other things can get you out in the forest. But this is just a terrifying ordeal that you guys went through. I mean, I think that would scare just about anyone. I think that first night would be enough to scare most people.
I still dream about it. Probably 3 nights a week. I still have nightmares about it. I'll wake up in just a cold sweat. It was probably a couple months ago now. I was laying in bed here at home. I had my window cracked open and it was raining outside. And the way the valley comes off the roof, all the rain comes off right next to harder scream. And I heard it, and it sounded just like when that thing was peeing. And I was kind of in that in-between state of waking up and dreaming. Before I really knew what happened, I was reaching for my gun, and I was just completely freaking out, and it just completely reminded me of that, and just completely freaked the crap out of me. It still really bothers me.
Yeah, and that's pretty understandable.
Not something that just goes away.
No, it never goes away. It'll get better with time, but it never goes away. And I think it'll always be something. It's one of those weird events in your life when you recount it, you can immediately go back to that position. You can immediately go back to that moment. You can smell the air. You can go with exactly the way you felt. You know, you have these feelings come up, and it's just one of those things that just always kind of sticks with you. How long ago did this happen?
It happened last August. It was August of 2014.
Yeah, and this is out in Nevada. There's not a lot of other, well, you saw the creature, so there's really no question on what you came across. Even if you hadn't seen it, there's not a whole lot out there in Nevada besides, well, even in the area you're in, I don't think you have black bears on that specific region of where you're at. But even if we're talking black bears, they're pretty skittish out there. You know, they'll take off. They generally don't hang around.
They don't hang around. They leave. And if they don't, then you might have a problem because there's probably something wrong with it. But they don't do that. I don't care what anyone says. They will not do that. No,
they don't. And you're right. If they are going to hang around, you're going to have an altercation. They're not going to sit and play games with you in a campground like that. You're going to have an altercation with a black bear if it's not leaving. The whole encounter just blows me away. You know, I can just picture myself there with you guys and kind of going through that. Not that I'd want to be there with you guys, but I can just imagine being there with you guys and going through that. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on the show, Chris. Very cool encounter.
I can't thank you enough for letting me share it with everybody. And just let me talk about it. Talking about it really helps a lot. Yeah. I don't know why. It does.
Yeah, it does. It actually does help out a lot to talk about it and kind of get it. You feel like every time you talk about it with someone who isn't going to say, you know, you're full of it, you feel like a weight's being lifted off your chest. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. I hope you had a great weekend. You know, last week I did a show on the Nephilim. And a lot of people, they will tell you behind the scenes, in private, that they think that Sasquatch is the Nephilim. Whether they'll admit it publicly or not, but a lot of people will tell you behind the scenes they believe that Bigfoot is the Nephilim. And so I thought I would do a show on the Nephilim. And I took my best swing at it. I think that either people loved it or they absolutely hated it. But I thought it was an interesting show to do. You know, I didn't want to do a debate show. I didn't want to, I just wanted to do, you know, a lot of people think that these are the Nephilim. Then let's do a whole show on the Nephilim. And then at the end of listening to everything that's being said, people can make up their minds and decide if they think that these things are the Nephilim or not. And my guest on the show was Gary Wayne, and he wrote a book. I misquoted the title throughout the show, which I'm embarrassed about, but the book is actually called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy: How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Planned to Enslave Humankind. And if you enjoyed the show from last week, I highly recommend that you get the book. I got my copy. Very, very, very fascinating book. I'm about a quarter of the way through it. If I can keep my brother's filthy hands off of it, or I can keep my girlfriend's filthy hands off of it. Every time I set it down, someone picks it up and starts reading it. But but if you get a chance, if you enjoyed the show, I highly recommend the book. I want to thank Gary for coming on again. I know Sasquatch really isn't his topic, but the Nephilim are, and his book is very, very well written. So I highly recommend that you get it. My trip for Texas has been put on the back burner due to all the flooding. With the production company fell behind on things that they were working on because of the flooding down in Texas. And so something that's going to be completed here in the near future. It's just been put on the back burner at the moment. But I will update you as soon as I have more information. If you get a chance, visit SasquatchChronicles.com. There's a lot of shows. If you're listening to the show on iTunes, if you're listening to the show on a podcast player, there's actually shows throughout the week that I do. This coming week, I'm going to be having a gentleman on from Arkansas who had an encounter in Oklahoma. And him and his friends actually shot at one of these creatures. They think they hit it. And he describes what it did after they actually shot it with a smaller caliber rifle. He describes what it did, how it turned and started coming towards them. It's a very, very fascinating account. He gives a lot of descriptions on what he saw and what they shot. And the other gentleman I'm going to be having on is a tracker from Canada who works for the forestry department, and he gets flown into areas in the middle of nowhere, and he came across some tracks, and he describes them as human-like but larger than a human, and he noticed some of the different features of the track to where he concluded it wasn't human. It had 5 toes and looked very boxy, kind of like our Fred Flintstone track. And it wasn't until he tracked the creature into a location where he actually saw it. And what's interesting about his encounter is he almost describes what Mike Woolley talked about in his encounter. The creature turned and whistled in the opposite direction of where he was at, and he immediately started feeling like it was calling others to that area, so he decided to get out of there. But the whole encounter is very, very interesting to listen to. So if you get a chance, check out SasquatchChronicles.com and look for that on Wednesday. Tonight I have 2 guests. My second guest tonight will be Carol, and Carol talks about some strange things going around her property, how the creatures have come in, tapped on the windows, a lot of strange things going on around her property. She went and talked to her neighbors, and her neighbors have seen it, her neighbors have dealt with it, and she talks about things that have been going on around the home and different things that she's seen out on the property, where she felt like she was going crazy at first, being in New Hampshire, but realized that they had Sasquatch on the property. And it's an interesting encounter to listen to. But first I want to talk to Gary. Gary was out on his dirt bike, came across one of these creatures crossing the road. Gary, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Big fan, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us what you were doing prior to the encounter, and then if you would, just kind of walk us into the encounter.
Yeah, so back in the mid-'80s, my parents and I, we belonged to a dirt bike club called the Tacoma Trail Cruisers, and we would spend like every other weekend out there, out in Capitol Forest by Olympia, and we were out there all the time riding bikes, going on poker runs, and just going out on the trails and enjoying the nature and stuff. And I was probably about 15, 16 years old, and I would go out on the trails by myself all the time. And I used to love to go up to Capitol Peak because the view was just tremendous. And so one day, I headed out on the trails, and I was just going about doing my thing, and trail I'd been on a million times before. And I come out of the trailhead out onto the logging road. I look to my left, and, I mean, what can I say? Boom, there it was. It was about just over 7 feet tall, black, covered in hair, just walking the tree line. I caught a good side of it, saw arms, I saw legs. I couldn't see the face. I couldn't see any facial expressions. It didn't turn my way. It was actually walking very nonchalantly, just like, you know, almost maybe as if it heard me coming and just figured, okay, now it's time to get off the road. But, you know, it wasn't one of these huge, big, massive ones that we've heard about a few times. It looked just like a really tall, well-built person. You know, I grew up in Calif, Washington. Even back then, it was, you know, Sasquatch, Bigfoot wasn't really known that much. I mean, it was kind of heard about, you know, the trifecta of the In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and Patterson Gimlin film and Legend of Boggy Creek. You know, we had heard about all that. But because we're in the Northwest, there's lots of tourist stops. There's places where you can find Sasquatch material and books and brochures and knickknacks and trinkets and, statues and that sort of thing. So even as a little kid, I was absolutely convinced. I mean, I kind of call myself a Sasquatch evangelist at the time because I would tell anybody and everybody. So when I saw this thing moving the tree line, I knew exactly what it was. But I was so hyped up with adrenaline. I was so excited because here was the proof, that I had heard about all my life and that I had actually believed. And of course, back then there wasn't the breadth of information that you have now as far as, they could possibly be dangerous or you should stay away or you should be cautious or anything. So I just pulled my bike right up to where this thing went in. I cut the engine. I'm listening and I can hear something big moving around in there. And then all of a sudden I was filled with this kind of a sense of dread or fear, like I realized how vulnerable I was, which was kind of strange because I had no inkling that this was going to be a dangerous situation. At the time I was still thinking Patty. I was thinking that, that they were calm or that they were, almost the friendly forest people. I didn't consider that it could be dangerous. But I was filled with this sense that I was in danger. So I fired up the engine and I took off. I finished my trip up to Capitol Peak, came back down, and for some reason I didn't tell anybody. And you would think that someone who had spent his whole life, trying to tell people that I would be running around telling everyone. And it certainly wasn't because I was afraid or that I thought people would think I was crazy, because I had given up on that a long time ago. So yeah, I got back and just kind of kept it with me.
So this thing was walking on two legs?
Oh yeah, definitely walking on two legs with a normal human gait. There was no mistaking what I saw. This was not a bear taking a walk. This was not a person in a costume. I was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was so brief from the time that it left the road to the end of the tree line. This was certainly not someone trying to make sure that I saw them. And it certainly wasn't a bear. And it was all black. It was jet black. I didn't see really any variation of color. I didn't see anything that really stood out.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. The part of the human psychology from your encounter that fascinates me is the fact that you didn't really tell anyone after believing that this thing existed.
Yeah, I'm still kind of perplexed by that because you would think that I would immediately turn around, run back, and start, tell my parents, tell my friends, everybody, oh, this is what happened, this is what I saw. But I didn't, and I think it's interesting because, I know that I'm not the only one. I know that there's been case after case after case of people having experience and they just don't tell anyone. Sometimes it's because they're afraid of being ridiculed and sometimes they're afraid of being mocked. But I know that there are a number of instances out there where they just keep it to themselves and not for any particular reason.
Yeah, there's actually there's more incidences of people not coming forward than people who do come forward. How long would you say the hair was on the creature?
It was actually relatively short. I know we hear about these different sightings where they have like this long hair that's kind of flowing, it blows in the wind. But it was very much a patty type hair covering, relatively close to the skin, not flowing, not billowing, not long like that at all.
Now this is like the middle of the day, I would imagine, since you're on a dirt bike, right?
Yeah, it was probably around noon, 1 o'clock, something like that. And the hair, the hair was short. The proportions were kind of person-like. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't like you hear about the no-heads, where they're trapezius is so large that you can't even see their head. No, this was just, it looked like a really well-built, muscular, 7-foot-tall person.
The length of the arms to leg ratio, did you notice as it was walking off, was there anything with its gait, or was it such a short sighting that you just you saw it and then it walked into the tree line?
Yeah, it was short enough that I didn't get a chance to see any sort of gait, but I could see the arms, and the arms were disproportionately long if it were to be a human. granted, it's a long time ago. I've kept this memory in my head because it was such a seminal moment in my life. It had a profound effect on me because it reinforced what I had already believed. But I do remember that the arms were much longer than a human. But I didn't see any arm swinging. I didn't see any, have a chance to see it walk any distance. It was only a couple seconds. So there's not a whole lot I can tell you about that part, but I can definitely tell you it was not a person.
And that's interesting too, that you had that sense of dread or that sense of fear come over you in that situation, because like you said, you had one mindset going into it, and it's just fascinating that all of a sudden now, when you see it, you get this sense of dread. You get this sense of, if it turns around as it comes back, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, in hindsight, we talk about these things like infrasound or, maybe they have some sort of ability to, to affect you in such a way that you're paralyzed or that you're not thinking right. I had never considered anything like that. That information wasn't out there. Thanks to BFRO, Finding Bigfoot, people have certain opinions about those shows and those organizations, but they really have done a service for us in propagating the experiences and helping us collate the data and connect the dots into what might be going on here. And now that I look back on it, I have to wonder to myself if maybe there wasn't something going on there, because, like you say, I had no reason to fear. I had no reason to think that I might be in danger because I just didn't believe those things. I didn't have access to that knowledge. But definitely, after I cut the engine and after about probably 15 seconds or so, I was definitely filled with a sense of, you should not be here. You should get out of here. This is not a good situation. There's some danger involved.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like survival instincts kicking in. It's interesting. I was telling a previous guest on I don't remember what show it was now, but I was talking to a previous guest, and we were talking about that sense of feeling like you're being watched, or that sense of dread, or that sense of just something's not right. And I talked about a time that when Woody and I were out hunting, I just had this feeling like we were being watched. I had this feeling like something wasn't right. I had a feeling like we were in danger. And there was nothing around us to give me that sort of an opinion. But come to find out, we actually had a cougar stalking us. And we went back, and it had been stalking us for quite some time. So it almost makes you wonder if it's like a survival instinct kicking in when another predator's around, maybe something we've forgotten. And I'm just speculating, but I'm just saying maybe something we have forgotten, and then we get put into these situations, and something kicks in and says, "Get out of here! Don't get away from this situation."
Yeah, no, sure. I think it's a good and valid speculation. I think it's actually written into our being, if you will, to sort of pick up on these subtle cues that your conscious mind may not be cueing in on. We've heard many stories about hunters who have been out, hunting, and suddenly the forest will go quiet, either preceding a Sasquatch sighting or something, but clearly the animals also pick up on something else too. And, that's, you talk about that sense of dread or fear that you and your brother had, and the same that I had. And that's not the only time I felt that. I've had a number of experiences, nothing as huge as actually witnessing one, but, a friend of mine had gone camping. I just decided to do some exploring, went across the road, walked up this, steep hill, and I was in all this virgin, untouched forest area, down trees and brush. And when I stood there, I got that exact same feeling. I had no reason to, and I have nothing to back it up. It was just a, personal experience, but, just that sense of, being watched and danger and get out of here, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know what it is. I'd love to know what it is. Clearly, me, you, anyone else that experiences that, it's, something's going on.
Did you ever go back down that trail on your dirt bike?
I had been back down on that trail a few times since that experience. I mean, it's been many years since we're part of that club, so I haven't been down there, 25 years or whatever. But after that experience, I did, and it was kind of a way of me trying what I had seen. I wanted to go back to that place. I wanted to see where it went in the tree line. I wanted to see, anything else. I wasn't looking for prints. I wasn't looking for anything like that. I was just trying to sort of kind of come to terms with it. I wanted to see the space and everything else. So, yeah, I had been back there, but, nothing else since then.
I mean, they're all interesting encounters to me. I don't think I've heard one yet that didn't make me stop and kind of scratch my head. You know what I mean? They're all every encounter I've heard is very, very interesting. Though I think the more people that come forward and share their encounters, the more we can get down to the bottom of everyone's question. What is this thing? We can all
absolutely, and that's why I think that your show is so important, because it really does provide a forum where people can come in and tell their stories. And the more pieces of the puzzle that we can, gather, the more information we can learn. Ultimately, we're not going to learn everything that we need to know or want to know until we have a specimen. But until then, your show is a great place for people to come, talk, and, connect the dots. And, I really appreciate having you on the show. I didn't expect to be here. I just sent you an email just so I wanted to sort of throw my hat in the ring and say, hey, this is my experience. For what it's worth, it wasn't like a Siege of Zenobia or, Cowman or anything, but, it's just one more for the list.
I can't thank you enough, too, for coming on.
Oh, man, it's totally my pleasure. I really appreciate it.
My next guest is Carol, and Carol lives in New Hampshire, and she had all sorts of things going on around the property for about the last 20 years, but not really believing in Bigfoot, not really believing that these creatures existed. A lot of things left her dumbfounded. And it wasn't until recent years that Sasquatch has been making themselves known more on the property. Well, Carol, I want to welcome you to the show. I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing the things that you have encountered and the things that you've seen. Most of the odd things started happening prior to you having any sort of sighting on this property. Can you kind of go into some of the weird things that were going on around the property?
Well, first of all, it spans, I would say, about 20 years. And, gosh, there were so many strange things that occurred that at the time I didn't associate with Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I didn't know any better. But I'm going to say it started, the first really strange thing that happened was the roaring sound. At the time I was living on this property alone, and it was in the middle of the night, probably after midnight, and I was awakened by the sound of what I can only describe as a lion roaring. I'm in New Hampshire. Obviously, we don't have lions. It woke me up out of a sound sleep, and it was so loud it literally made the windows rattle in my bedroom at the time. So it scared the heck out of me. I woke up. I didn't turn any lights on, but I wanted to make sure that my cats were in the house. So I verified that they were in the house. I went back into my bedroom, and I listened to it a few more times. And then, thankfully, it started moving off in the distance. So I knew it was moving away from me. So I was like, oh, wow, that is so weird. There must be like a carnival in town or something. Somebody lost a lion.
Yeah.
I watched the news and things like that. And, of course, nothing came up. Nobody lost a lion. I talked to the neighbors who were fairly close, and they didn't hear anything. But, I don't know what to say. I know what I heard. But I didn't think much of it after that. I just, life moves on. But, we had wood knocking. That's not that unusual around here. You can pretty much go out, over the course of a week. If you go out in the evening and you're quiet and you listen, you will hear knocking in the woods. It's just a normal thing. I've had tapping on the windows. My neighbors had tapping on the windows. My daughters had tapping on the windows. There are a lot of different things that, have occurred over the course of the years that I didn't know any better. I didn't know what to think of it. I just kind of blew it off and went on with life.
And there was an odd occurrence with your daughter that first time that wasn't she working on her homework?
Yes. Probably, she's 13 now. I'm going to say she was probably around 9. I'm not exactly sure when it was. It wasn't that long ago, but she used to like to play games on the computer, and she also had to do some IXL homework for school every Sunday night, and she'd have to do it on the computer, and she would do that in the back bedroom. And she was in there one night. I don't know if she was doing homework or playing games, and she came screaming down the hallway, crying hysterically, saying that she saw a monster in the backyard. We talked to her about it, because clearly there's no such thing as monsters. But she described a hairy thing standing up out of the grass and turning towards her as she was looking out the window. and she said it was really scary looking. She described basically what sounds like a smaller Bigfoot. And at the time, we just thought, she's young, it's her imagination, whatever. But I'll tell you what, she would not go back in that room again unless we were with her, and we actually closed the shades and closed the curtains so that she could use the computer even for her homework. So in retrospect now, it's like, oh, I think something might have actually happened there, and she wasn't imagining it. And at the time, I certainly wasn't thinking Bigfoot. Never knew that I had any experiences here at the time. So I think something actually happened at that point. She's had other experiences since then, but at that time, we just, hey, I don't know what it is. I think it's her imagination. Now I don't think it was.
Yeah. Now you experienced tapping on the windows too as well, didn't you?
I did. Probably about a year and a half ago, and I was sleeping on the couch. I've fallen asleep on the couch. I work, and a lot of times I'll do work when I get home, and it's not uncommon for me to fall asleep on the couch. And I tell my husband, well, just don't wake me up, because if you wake me up and I go lay down in the bed, I'm just going to sit there all night wide awake, so just let me sleep. This was one of those nights. I was sleeping on the couch, and I was awakened. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning by something knocking on the window. We have a big picture window over the back of the couch. And I always keep the curtains closed and the shades drawn because of the light reflects off the television screen, all that. Anyway, so I hear this knocking, and at first it, woke me up. I wasn't sure what I was hearing. And then as I'm listening, I realized there's somebody knocking on the window. I'm like, well, what is going on? And then my mind kind of shoots over to, oh, my God, my daughter's been saying she's been hearing knocking on her bedroom window. We're just blowing it off when she tells us it's because we think she has a wild imagination. I was too scared to do anything at that point. I just stayed there and laid on the couch until I was sure it was done and over with, and basically stayed awake till the light came up and then looked out on the porch, and of course there was nothing there. But then later I did speak to one of our neighbors who's probably 3 doors down, and she's telling me and her husband are telling me that they have issues with something tapping on their windows. Their property also backs up against the swamp area, and they also have something that comes up on their deck at night. And initially they thought the house was haunted, and now they're thinking, well, no, there's something outside that is, it's bothering them. I'm not sure if they're on board with the whole Sasquatch or Bigfoot thing, but after I talked to them, I realized, okay, I might not be crazy here. There's actually something going on.
And what did your neighbor say?
My neighbor said that at nighttime they will hear knocking on the window, and their back windows are they're similar to ours. They're like 7 feet off the ground. Something will knock on the windows, and sometimes they'll hear walking across the deck, which runs along the whole length of the back of their house. And they'll wake up and they'll look, and there's nothing there. In addition to that, they've had equipment go missing, such as large ladders. The husband there is a contractor, so he does, contracting work, and they'll find the ladders later in the swamp area behind the house. Now, these are really large ladders. They're like professional grade ladders, if you will. Kids aren't going to be moving those around, and they're certainly not going to be throwing it in the swamp.
Right.
So at this point, they have central lights all around their house. I mean, you come into my neighborhood 3 o'clock in the morning, and there are times when that thing goes off. It looks like a damn Christmas tree. In addition to that, the wife does home hospice care, and oftentimes she'll work late in the evening. She'll come home 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and she has told me that sometimes she'll come around the bend. It's kind of like a cul-de-sac here. She'll come around the bend, and she will see this large, thin, shadow-like thing walking around there's an old cabin back there, and it's so tall it reaches the actual eaves of the cabin, and she doesn't know what it is. I was speaking to her and her husband, and I said, well, do you think that maybe it could be bears or something like that? And her husband, who, he's an outdoor type of guy, and he does a lot of hunting and stuff like that. And he looked at me with all seriousness, and he said, it were no bear. And he just walked away. Well, I wonder what it is.
Yeah.
So,
I would imagine
it's very interesting, and it's almost like nobody really wants to talk about it. And I know firsthand because I've talked to people in my family about it, and they're not mean to me, but boy, the silence is deafening. They look at you like you have lobsters crawling out of your ears or something. I mean, it's amazing. It's like, look, I'm not inclined to see things. I've never been the wacky one. Can't you guys at least hear me out and listen to what I'm saying. Don't tell me it's a bear. It couldn't be a bear. Don't tell me it's a deer or a moose. It can't be a deer or a moose. I mean, I've twisted myself into a pretzel enough times trying to describe it, and there's just no way it could be a deer or a bear or a moose.
It's interesting, the neighbor that you talked to, how he basically turned and looked at you and said it's no bear, and he has this place lit up like a Christmas tree. You know, I almost wonder if you went and talked to him now and said, hey, it's a Sasquatch. I almost wonder what he would say. You know, he may be, it kind of sounds like he's doing all of the things that people generally do when they have this issue. They just light the whole place up. Kind of sounds like he already knows what's going on.
I think you're right, and I think it's something that, you know, I'm definitely going to do. I think I'm going to sit down with him sometime in the summer, and you know, we it's not infrequent. It's common. We'll have a bonfire out back, and everybody in the neighborhood kind of gets together. I think I'm going to talk to him seriously about it and tell him, hey, this is what I think's going on. What do you think? You know, just kind of open the door, give him that carrot, so to speak, so I can maybe get more information.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. A lot of times when you're very direct with people, especially in a situation like this, they will open up and tell you what they've seen. They'll open up and tell you if they think you're being serious about it, they'll open up and tell you what they've seen and what's going on. You actually, well, let me back up. Your daughter saw the creature before you saw it, correct?
Actually, I think, I saw it probably about 15 years ago, but at the time that I saw it, I thought I must have just imagined it because I didn't have a category to put it in. It didn't look like what I thought a Bigfoot would look like. I mean, this thing was, I don't know, it had to be 7 feet tall anyway. It was thin, and it really did look human, and it was, you know, all of maybe 6 feet from my back window. I was in that back bedroom on the computer, and this was before my daughter was even born, and I saw something there, and it was one of those things where I didn't even really tell people about it because I had to have imagined it. There's no such thing, you know. But I would think about, I mean, I remember sitting down and thinking about, well, what was that? Did you actually see something, or was that your imagination? It had to be my imagination. Maybe it was periodola. I wouldn't have called it that back then, but maybe you just thought you saw something. But when I think about it, there's just too much detail, too much color. It doesn't fit with, seeing a face in the wood grain. It's not like that. This was full-on color. This was 6 feet from my window. It was weird. It's not anything my brain would have made up. You know what I mean? It didn't look like I thought what a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch would look like. I thought that would look like, you know, Chewbacca or, you know, something like that. Harry and the Hendersons. It didn't look like that. It looked completely different. It looked quite human, but it had hair on it.
So it's standing 6 feet from the window?
Yeah, and I think what happened was the phone rang. The phone rang. My window was open. It was early evening. I think it was about September. And I picked up the phone. It was my friend, and I knew when I got on the phone with my friend from college that would be on the phone for a couple of hours. So my idea was I was going to go pick up the phone in the kitchen. Back then we didn't have the wireless cell phones or the wireless phones. They were all, you know, the landlines with the long cords. So I wanted to change phones. So I told her, hold on, I'm going to run to the kitchen type of thing. So I did that, came back in the bedroom. I was going to hang up the phone, and I looked out because the phone is on a desk right underneath that back bedroom window. And there standing there is this, I'm going to say it's probably 7 feet tall. It was very thin. It didn't look healthy at all. I remember thinking at the time it was either very sick or very old or perhaps both. My brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing because I remember having these odd thoughts, like, is that like an old biker dude who's naked in my backyard, who's really hairy, and then it jumps over to some old Asian Fu Manchu dude, and I hung the phone up and I kind of walked away, and I got maybe halfway through the bedroom, and like, what the? And I turned around, went back to the desk, looked out the window, and there was nothing there. I pretty much just blew it off, but what I saw in that short period of time was something that was about 7 feet tall. It was covered with like gray hair or fur. I don't know what the difference is. The fur was lighter or more sparse in the midsection. So I remember seeing that it had breasts, not like a woman's breast, but more like an elderly man's breast. I know that sounds funny, but you know, you could tell it didn't look female in the breast area anyway. It had a 4-pack instead of a 6-pack. The skin under the fur was kind of like a hazy purplish gray, or it almost looked like somebody with really pale skin who's been swimming in cold water for a long time. But the face is what threw me because it looked human. It didn't have hair on the face. It didn't have shiny skin or anything like that, and I think the skin was probably like a leathery tan reddish color, reminding me of like the back of the neck of like a farmer who's been farming for years in the sun, the really sun damaged skin. And it had a regular nose, except it was very flared, but it was a hooded nose. It reminded me of the actor John Amos, who played the father on Good Times. The eyes, I didn't see so much of the eyes because I think they were sunken in deep. I could see a little bit of a white under the eyes. I don't know if it's because it had a lot of white around the eyes or because it was sort of looking up into the window. I remember seeing a lot of bloodshot in that. And it was kind of yellowish too. In addition to that, had very deep grooves going from the front of the cheekbone down to the jawline. They weren't wrinkles. It was just deep grooves. It was like part of its physiology. I don't know why or how. And one of the things that stuck out to me was it had long Fu Manchu whiskers, like a mustache. I don't remember if it started under the nose or at the end of the mouth, but it went all the way down past its chest on both sides. It had very chapped lips. The lower lip was much like a man's lip, slightly fuller, but the same color as the rest of the skin. And I could see like the cracking on the sides, like the sides of the mouth. And the eyes were strange because the lower lid is what mostly I saw or what caught my attention. And it was extremely red and looked almost swollen. It almost seemed like it was slightly, like the lower eyelid was slightly bulged out. I mean, looking at it, maybe conjunctivitis or something, but it was in both eyes and there was no discharge. It was very ugly. It didn't look like anything. It didn't look like a monkey. It didn't look like I thought Bigfoot would look like. It was a monster, and therefore I must have imagined it wasn't there when I turned around and looked again. So I kind of I put it away. I didn't really talk to anybody about it. And then years later, I would have other sightings, not as up close as that, but I would see things that just don't make sense. I can't make sense of it unless we consider something like Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Then it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I think your description is right on. Like you and I talked last night, everyone that I've talked to that's been that close, and usually it's a window-type encounter, they have that same description. The skin is kind of cracked, kind of like a leather is cracked, if you bend it, or like you said it perfect, like an old man that's been working in the sun, how his back neck is all wrinkled. Everyone generally has that type of description. And then what's odd is, so in your area, I get more people saying it looked more human-like than they'll say ape or chimp.
I know, and I remember listening to, previous Sasquatch Chronicle shows, and Will was saying that his experience was that he couldn't believe that people were saying it was human-looking because he was more used to the Patterson-Gimlin type of creature. And I'm listening to him like, you know what? I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I can't believe the Patterson-Gimlin creature is real because that looked nothing like what I saw. So, yeah, there's got to be different types.
Yeah, I think there's definitely different types. Down south, as you go southeast, in some states you'll get that weird, the description like what you're giving. But I would say it's mainly up there in the northeast is where we get that description of it looked more human.
Right. And I did some research, and the closest I can come to for the Northeast, legend and lore is something called a wood devil, but it really doesn't go, I haven't found any descriptions in terms of what its face is, but they do say that it's tall and it's thin. And that's exactly what I saw. I thought it looked sickly. It was quite thin.
Do you remember hearing any noise with that window being open?
No, nothing at all. There was nothing stood out other than the visual. Nothing at all. I mean, I'd had the window open. I was doing some work on the computer in the back bedroom. At the time, I lived alone here, and nothing out of the ordinary, at least not that I recall.
I'm trying to get a timeline here. So your daughter comes in with her friends and tells you they saw something, and that was before you saw it again, right?
Yes. After my daughter was born, she was probably 5, 6, somewhere in that range. The first time that she actually saw something was berry picking. We're on a very large property. It used to be an old farm, so we have a lot of like open fields surrounded by woods, and it's all interconnected. And if she goes up front, there's a plethora of berry bushes out there, and the kids like to pick the berries when they're in season. And she always has a gaggle of kids here for whatever reason, so they all went out picking berries. And she, like I said, she's about 6, and They all come screaming back, crying, upset. And this is what she said to me, there's some black guy standing in the woods with a hoodie walking back and forth, like he's mad that we're there. Like, oh, well, girls, why don't you just stay here, and when Daddy comes home, we'll go fetch your berries, because they left their berries out there. And that was the first time her and, I think there was 5 other kids, and they all, oh, yeah, there was somebody out there. Well, we're in New Hampshire. We're in the middle of the woods. We don't get too many black guys running around with hoodies walking back and forth. It just is, we're in the woods. It's not a neighborhood. There's not like streets to be walking on or anything like that. There's not even really hiking trails back there. So it makes absolutely no sense. But at the time, well, they're all young. Maybe they imagined it, or maybe they thought they saw something. They freaked themselves out, something like that's what I'm thinking. I didn't really, once again, at that point, I didn't put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, and that's an odd description for kids to give in that location.
Yeah.
At that time,
It's not normal around here. I mean, at the time they didn't say hoodie because they didn't use the word hoodie. I think she said it was like a sweatshirt, and then it just kind of progressed from there. And I didn't even think of Bigfoot until I think it was 3 years ago in the summer. I was watching the children out at the pool. It was a super hot day. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we have our property bordered the swamp. I was sitting on the picnic table watching the kids swim, and I looked over towards the swamp, and I saw what looked like a boulder. And I thought, well, I never noticed there was a boulder there before. That's odd. And I started thinking, well, we didn't cut down all that brush over there, so maybe that's why you're seeing it. It was nothing at the time. I'm just watching it, and I told the girls, don't drown each other. I'm going to run in the house, get some more iced tea, and I'm coming right back out. I did that, sat down, looked over, and the boulder was gone. At that point, I quickly got the kids out of the pool and got them in the house. But it was too big to be a bear. The only thing it could have been would be a moose, but it never moved. And it looked like it looked like something wider than a football player with full gear on, hunched down with their head on their shoulder. And it stayed like that the entire time I looked at it because it was a boulder. It never moved. And it was at that point I started thinking, something's going on here. I don't think that could have been a moose. A moose might be able to present the size laying down, kind of, but the rest of it just doesn't make sense. It couldn't be a moose. I sent my husband out there when he came home from work, and he looked, and sure enough, all of the weeds and the grass in that area were all matted down like something had been laying there. And he was able to follow the tracks halfway around the swamp. I don't know if he could have gone any farther, because at that point I got freaked out and I started calling him back. I'm like, you need to come back. We don't know what it is. You need to come back. You need to come back. But another interesting thing is at the time I was looking at the supposed boulder, the neighbor 2 doors down, his property, the one who has the issues himself, his property, he was weed whacking and mowing at that time that I was watching this boulder. So whatever it was brave enough to just sit there while he at times was probably 20 feet away from it, weed whacking.
Yeah, that is interesting. What color was the boulder? Obviously
it was black, and it was very black. And I remember thinking that's really weird because the boulders in this area tend to be sandy colored or red. We do have a boulder out back that has like black, almost like tar pitch or something poured on it. I'm like, well, maybe that's what it is. But then I was thinking, well, it is in one area of shade with light behind it and light in front of it, so anything's going to look black, So what color it really was, I don't know. But because it was in shadow, it was all in black. And it was good size. It was good size. I bet you it was at least 3.5 feet across. And it had the pointy head, but the pointy head was down on the shoulder. And there was like no light coming through like between the legs or anything like that. There was some brush in the area where it was. So, I didn't see feet or anything like that, but it looked like a weird shaped boulder.
Did your husband say what the tracks looked like that he was following?
He just said that it was mashed down, and he left it at that. And we talked about it afterwards, and he said, well, I don't know what it was. It could possibly be a moose, but I'm not sure. Maybe it was some guy in a ghillie suit. And I'm like, okay, a guy in a ghillie suit is possible, but it's July 2nd. It's a heat wave. You're in New Hampshire. It's not a hunting season. It's private property and in the swamp. And he's watching you watch kids in a swimming pool? I don't know. Maybe. It's not impossible. But it was very strange. But at any rate, that's kind of got me started on the whole. Let's do some research. Let's find out what's going on here, because I'm getting a bad feeling, So
yeah,
that kind of got me looking into things, and it was then that I realized that a lot of things that happen around here on this property are kind of part and parcel with, a Bigfoot activity in the area. It just kind of blew me away and made me feel really strange. But at first I thought it was kind of neat, and then I realized, well, this isn't actually neat because I can't go sit on my deck at night now. My head's on a swivel. It makes me nervous,
Yeah,
I don't want my kids outside or my daughter outside. She's not allowed to play near the wood line. She has to play in the front or right directly in our yard, immediate yard, unless there's an adult out there to watch her. So, life goes on, but it's not quite the same, and it's not really fun.
I got to thinking last night after you and I were talking, and one of the things I would probably do that'll make them go away is I'd set up trail cams all around your wood line, because it seems like everyone I've ever talked to, the moment they do that, these things,
they get quiet.
They go away. Yeah, they don't. And there's a lot of different reasons why they would do that, but I think that that seems to be the main thing people do to make them go away.
Right. I'm in a strange place because there's part of me that wants to catch these things in terms of just get some evidence of it, mostly for the people closest to me, so I can say, hey, look, I'm not crazy. But of course, there's the other part of me that's like, it freaks me out. I don't have a difficult time sleeping at night. I'm kind of used to it. It's just life. But every now and then you think, I don't know what's out there. I don't know what exactly it is. I can say, well, this is a Bigfoot or this is a Sasquatch, but what does that tell me? Not much, because we have, differing views on what this thing actually is. Is it a predator? Probably. Does it attack people? Sometimes, I bet. Are the ones in this area aggressive? I don't know. So it's tough. But yes, I'm thinking I'm going to, sling trail cams over my daughter when I send her out. That way she'll be safe. But,
yeah,
that's something we want to do. I do have a couple of trail cams out. We never catch anything at all. But after last summer, we had an incident with a tent that we had set up in our backyard, and I'm kind of thinking I have it narrowed down as to what areas they may be coming through. I don't think they're interested in anything that's going on here. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my daughter. They're just coming through the area. I live between a swamp and a river. We're surrounded by fields. We have lots of deer, and, so there's plenty of stuff to eat, but they just happen to be coming through this area. It's like a highway for them or something. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking towards putting some trail cams out. I'm hoping to get some third-generation ones and see if maybe we can't catch something.
What happened with the tent incident?
Last summer, we had a little get-together, Annie and her friends. It was a week before school started, and we pitched a rather large tent in the backyard, really, I'm going to say 300 feet from our back door. And, we have a campfire and everything set up out there. And it was a girls-only type of thing. And we had this 3-room tent set up. I was in one section of the tent, and the girls occupied the other 2 sections of the tent. The first night we had it pitched, everything was fine, except in the middle of the night, I heard something walk. The way it was set up, it was facing the swamp area. So it was facing the swamp area, and the window in my daughter called it the cave of loneliness because I'm an adult and I'm not allowed to be with them. In my cave of loneliness, the window, the privacy screen zipper was broken, so that stayed open. So I was in the cave of loneliness facing the swamp, and I was awoken probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the sound of something walking through the tall grass just outside of the swamp area. At the time, I'm thinking, well, probably a deer. We have lots of animals around here. I've seen deer, moose, you name it, in our backyard. So I didn't think too much of it, and the dog started barking, and whatever it was kind of left. The second night, the same thing happened. It was about the same time, and except the second night, it was like it was pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then it came in, and something touched the tent over the top of the window. And this is a tall tent. In the middle of the tent, putting the tarp over it, I had to have somebody help me. I had to throw it over to them because I couldn't reach it. I'm not real tall, but I would say the tent was probably at least 6.5 feet high in the middle. Anyway, something's rubbing on the tent. At that point, the dog's out there with us. He wakes up, starts barking, comes running over, and whatever it is takes off. Okay, I told my husband about it. He laughed at me. He said, it was probably just the cat rubbing against the outside of the tent. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I can live with that. The following night, the last night we were camping out there, was a bit more interesting. Annie and the girls were in the tent. My husband and I came in the house to finish our dinner because they ate before us, and it was too dark, and I didn't want to eat in the total darkness. So my husband and I came in the house. The dog follows us in because he's not stupid. We have food. So I'm sitting there eating dinner, and my daughter calls me on her cell phone, and she says, "Is Daddy outside?" I'm like, "No, why?" And then she just immediately bursts out in tears, and she starts talking really fast, and I can't understand a word she's saying, but I can hear that all the other kids in the background are making noise too. So my husband and I run out the back door to get over there, and she tells us, and the girls are all crying. I mean, they're at this point, they're, 11 and 12-year-olds. They're crying. They're hysterical. She said that something came running up from the opposite side of the house, and they could hear it coming across the back lawn. It touched the tent, like dragged its hand over the tent, and it ended up on the very top of the tent, pushed down, and then it jumped a retaining wall that the tent was up against in the back. And it scared the heck out of them. At that point, I thought, well, somebody's playing a prank. I don't know who it would be that would be playing this prank. It's dark. We can't see anything. So we just kind of blew it off, assuming that, maybe one of the neighborhood boys was pranking them. We finally got them calmed down and convinced them that, no, it's probably nothing. Don't worry about it. We can continue sleeping in the tent because, quite frankly, I'd clean the house. I didn't want, 5 12-year-olds in my house. So I slept out there with them again that night, and probably around 3 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it was 2:30, I got up and I used the bathroom. The girls were already sleeping. I ran into the house real quick. I put on a sweatshirt because I was freezing. Went back out to the tent, started falling asleep, and then I heard a man yell something out. It was just like a one-syllable something. I'm not sure what he said. It was like, yeah, that, something like that. I'm not really sure, but that's odd because there's nothing around us. The neighbors I can see, their backyards, their houses, their lights are all out. It's Monday night. It's, nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. I hear it off in the distance. I'm like, well, there's an old gas station over there. People will sometimes pull in there. Maybe it's teenagers or something. I didn't think much of it. And then I hear the sound walking through the grass again that I heard the past 2 nights. And it's like, choo, 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 choo. It sounds bipedal, I guess. I mean, I'm not an expert at that sound, but it sounds like somebody walking through the grass. At this point, I'm thinking, oh, we're going to catch the person that's trying to prank us, So I'm ready to go. I'm going to scare them right back. So I'm laying in the tent, and then the sound changed. It went from like a walking sound to a dragging sound through the grass, and it was like, shh, shh, shh. I'm just listening, and then I hear something. At first, I'm like, is that like a truck on the highway in the distance? And then I realized, no, that's growling. That's freaking growling. Something's growling. And I'm listening. I'm like, okay, so this is somebody they're trying to scare us. They're growling, and I'm listening, and the growl never stops. It's like the deepest snarling type of growl. It was terrifying. It wasn't loud. It sounded like it was doing it under its breath. It was the strangest thing. And I'm listening, and in addition to that sound, there's like this sound, like something's being dragged across the lawn. And I'm stunned stupid at this point. I'm not even moving. I'm just laying in my sleeping bag, just trying to figure out what's going on. And I realized it's come right up to the tent, and it went around the tent where the open window was. It went around to the other side, basically where my head was. And I got up, I called my husband, and I'm trying to be quiet and, tell him something's out here. It's growling. It's really scary. You need to come out here. And it started growling again. And then I look down, and I see my dog, whose eyes are open, and he's laying at the bottom of my sleeping bag. He's just laying there, and his eyes are open. And I'm like, why are you not barking? And once I realized he wasn't barking, he was just laying there, and I had this horrible growling thing right there. I just kind of lost it. Realized, well, I don't have time to be scared. I have 4 young girls in this tent. I need to do something. So I had gotten up, and I tried to wake the girls up, and I found a flashlight that didn't work, but it was a big mag light, so I figured wherever it was, I could hit it. By the time my husband got out, I heard the screen door slam, so I was like, oh, thank God. I was scared. I was just so scared. I wish I'd looked out to see what it was, but I was so scared. It was gone. So the next day we looked for the footprints or anything on the other side of that retaining wall, and sure enough, there were 2 distinct footprints. It's not dirt, it's clover, and if you step on clover, oftentimes it'll take the shape of a print. It's not very distinct, but you can see the outline of 2 footprints. And it looked like whatever went over that retaining wall went over butt first, landed on its back legs, and then ran off through the dirt pathway. or stone pathway into the wood line. So I will never know what that was. I know what I'm thinking it is now.
You know, I think the human psychology in a situation like this is to try to find another answer for what it is.
A reasonable answer, because
Yeah.
it doesn't really exist. No, it doesn't really exist. No, it's not in my backyard in New Hampshire. Of course not. That's crazy. Only crazy people think that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you try and rationalize what is going on and what you've seen, what your daughter says she's seen, what your neighbors have told you. And I think especially in your situation, you can really, all the pieces of the puzzle are there. It's definitely not a person running through there playing pranks on you. It's definitely not a bear. It's not in your situation, I mean, it sounds like you got some major...
And because of that, I thank you so much for the show, because I don't think I ever would have gotten there had I not been listening to other people's encounters. I really don't. For the longest time, I thought, there must be something wrong with you. Why are you seeing these things? This doesn't make any sense. And I didn't even know what I was seeing, but these weird things going on. And it was because I was listening to your show, I knew about the lions, or it was because I was listening to your show that I knew about the potential of it crawling up on you. I wouldn't have known any of these things. I listened to one of your shows, and there was a gentleman talking about seeing one who, and his nose was like the guy that played the father on Good Times on that 70s show. Well, God darn it, that's almost the same exact words I used when I was thinking about it after I had my first sighting. How bizarre is that? What are the chances of that happening? That was 15 years ago. The other guy talked about an old Asian dude. That's exactly what I thought when I saw it here. You know, so it really helped. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Oh, I appreciate it. Like I said, you know, the show is people like you coming forward. It's not me, you know, so I appreciate you coming forward and sharing it. Had you had any more sightings since that time?
The last sighting I had was, I think it was two years ago. It was in August. I was having dinner with my husband. My daughter wasn't home at the time. And the way our house is situated, we have these large front kitchen windows that overlook the front lawn and the side, the side driveway, which is bordered by the river. I saw this thing just out of the clear blue walk through the wood line, and you have to understand that this river doesn't really have a slope down into the river anymore. We had a big storm. It washed everything out, including a lot of large trees, so it's a straight drop down. It's like a 20-foot drop down to the river now. And I saw something walking on, I would say, a piece of land that's probably no more than 4 inches wide, just walk right past me. And it was 7 feet tall, looked all black because it was in slight wood line there. It had the pointy head. It was looking down, had big, huge hands like it was wearing oven mitts. It was thin. And then it just, like, dropped out of sight, like the earth had opened up and swallowed it. And at the time, I'm like, well, that has to be your imagination, because nothing can just disappear like that. It was later I came across, I think, a Sinker-Sunker video where he describes how these things can just, the way they move, and they almost leave 1 foot behind them, they can literally drop down without bending or anything like that. And he has a video of it. I'm like, oh, my God, that's what I saw. Okay, you know what, Carol? You may be crazy, but whatever it is you're seeing, it's called a Sasquatch. Nothing else makes sense.
Yeah, when they drop down like that on all fours, I mean, it happens within a split second. They're down on all fours. It takes them no time at all. It's like they just collapse, just drop.
It was bizarre, and it's just like everybody says. There was no, like, bounce as it walked. It looked like it was wearing roller skates or something. It just glided across my field of view. My husband didn't see it. His back was to the window, but he saw my reaction. He's like, Carol, are you okay? Are you okay? He thought at the time maybe I was choking or something, but no, I wasn't. And I told him, I thought I saw, something weird out there. Yeah, it's very odd. And I know other people are going through this, and I really feel for them, because you feel kind of crazy, and especially around here, we're not real open to the idea of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. We're in New England, God's sake. Maybe it's a bit better on the West Coast, but it's not terribly open around here.
Yeah, and that's generally what I've heard from the East Coast. A lot of people who have encounters, or even down south. I mean, even down south, they have. Mm-hmm. I've talked to so many people that have a similar situation like what you have. It's like trying to squeeze it out of them on what's going on around their property. It's very hard to get them to talk. I think the West Coast is a little bit more liberal.
Right, open to the idea. You've been dealing with it longer, at least, publicly, I guess. Anyhow. Yeah, it's very strange. And I did have a question for you. Have you ever heard of these things making, like, cooing sounds? I swear I had something on this back porch probably in March. It was the creepiest thing. I don't know. My husband swears I must have been sleeping, but it sounded like something walked up on the steps. It rubbed against the window. It rattled the door handle on the storm door, and then I started hearing it sounded like two of them. Go, hoo. I can't do it because I can't get deep enough, but it was the strangest damn thing.
Yeah, no, I heard that at the Browns property when
They were doing the swing? Okay.
Yeah, I was doing the baby crying. I was playing the audio of the baby crying on YouTube, and I was basically just blasting it. And something came in, and it was making that exact same noise towards where I had the audio just blasting. No one, was kind of away from the area, but I had the audio just blasting of a baby crying, and that was the exact noise it made when it came in. It stayed in the brush, but when it came in...
Where is the Browns? Is that in Texas?
Washington State.
Oh, Washington. Okay, I'm sorry.
Your situation's unique because, kind of like the Browns, I don't think if you would have had some violent behavior going on or some aggression going on, I think you guys would have experienced it by now. The tapping on the window concerns me, though.
Nearly 20 years, and, nothing. Maybe it's been up on the porch. I can't say for certain. I think it has, but, I have no proof of that. That's probably, and the growling at the tent, but to this day, I don't know that it was a Bigfoot that crawled up from the tent. I don't know because I didn't have the nerve to look out. I was afraid that if I looked out, whatever was out there would know exactly what's in the tent, and therefore it would go into hunting mode or something. I figured if it didn't know it was just, a bunch of girls in the tent, it might think twice about attacking, but I still kicked myself because all I had to do was look out the window, but I just couldn't do it. I could not bring myself to do it.
Well, like I said, at the end of the day, I really think we're dealing with a wild animal at the end of the day, on the primate scale. Yeah. But one of the things the kids said when they were in the tent, it was a black man pacing back and forth. I've heard other people give that description, and usually it's right before there's some sort of display. They'll pace back and forth like they're trying to work themselves up the courage to bluff charge you.
Do something similar to that. They'll kind of run in a circle and look at you.
Right.
And then you don't vacate the area they're coming after you.
Yeah. And, the tapping on the window concerns me, especially with your daughter. And I know I asked you the other day if the main focus was your daughter, if it was tapping on the window consistently across the board to everyone in the house, or if it's just your daughter. It just bothers me. It just concerns me when I hear stuff like that.
Right. We keep, she keeps her windows closed and she keeps the shades drawn, and we also make sure the dog is in the bedroom with her at night. She hasn't had any tapping on the window probably for a year and a half, somewhere in that range. So I think it's finished checking out this area or this particular house. Maybe it's moved on to somebody else's house. I don't know. People won't talk about it. But so far, so good.
Well, and I'm speculating, but it kind of sounds like it's in a travel corridor. You guys are just...
I'm thinking, I'm thinking that too, because, it's frequent enough to cause concern, but it's not something that happens every night. I mean, it's, 2 or 3 very weird things will happen per year type of thing. And I know over the winter, it was odd, I kept hearing banging metal out back. And there's nothing out back. It's woods. There might be some, refuse thrown out there from, when this was farmland. But there was definitely something going mental on metal pieces out there in the dead of winter. So I think they're here all year long, or they're coming through this area all year long. But I don't think they're necessarily like living on this property. I think because we're situated, we have some cornfields around us, and we have the river, and then of course we have quite a few ponds out back, and then the swamps right there. I'm sure all of those are like prime hunting territories for a predator. And so it kind of makes sense that it might be just coming through this area, and every now and then getting, curious or something, and deciding it wants to tap on windows or look in a window or come up on a porch or something like that. least that's the story I'm telling myself at this point.
Yeah, no, and what I would do, honestly, is I'd talk to your neighbor, compare notes, see what he has going on, and I'd just be straight up and honest with him. Yeah, I think it's a Bigfoot. I think it's a Sasquatch. I don't think, and you might be surprised at his answer. It sounds like he's probably going to give you the answer you want from what he's saying.
And I'm comfortable with that. You know, we're fairly close to them. I mean, we don't hang out all the time, but, you know, our kids play together or that type of thing. So I'm comfortable doing that. And even my husband's on board now because he doesn't completely think, he believes me, but he thinks that oftentimes I'm mistaken. He thinks maybe I have Bigfoot fever, and I can understand him thinking that. That makes sense, but, you know, I don't think so. But he's also going to come with me, and, you know, we're going to talk to them. And see, you know, what they have to say, because I think they may have some good stories themselves.
I don't think it's Bigfoot fever. I think that, you know, especially, I hear it all the time, especially in situations like this, where people don't know what it is, and they think either, you know, how many times I've heard people say, hey, I thought the house was haunted. And I would ask them, well, why do you think
I remember you saying that, and it struck me as funny because that's what they said, too. You know, that's what my neighbor said. He thought the house was haunted.
Yeah. When you come to that conclusion, well, why you come to that conclusion? Well, you know, there's tapping on the house. There's, you know, the door handles get shaked. You know, they start describing what sounds like paranormal behavior, and then they'll come out and say, and then I saw it. You know, like the one guy, I think it was down in Texas, he told me that he thought the house was haunted until he ran out the back door and saw the thing running off from hanging on his house.
Ran smack dab into it. That's nice.
Yeah. I remember he said, I kind of hoped it was haunted after that, and it wasn't.
It is. You know what? It's the fear of fear. That's I was thinking about that the other night. It's not so much that I have these things like trying to attack us or anything like that, but it's fear of fear. Am I going to walk out to my car one night? You know, I let my guard down, whip around the corner, and there's going to be this monster standing there. And then won't I just die instantaneously on the spot? So it's like a fear of fear. I'm afraid of being afraid. I've been here for 20 years. I garden. I do all the things you do outside, swim, this, that, and the other thing, and I've never had anything bother me. But then again, I don't typically come out here at night, and, you know, moving forward, I probably won't be out here once it gets dark either. So, you know, I think a lot of it is fear of fear.
You know, in that situation, like I said, they haven't done anything yet, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But at the end of the day, they seem to be very unpredictable too.
Yeah.
So you do want to keep your
eyes open, and that's what we'll do. You know, my daughter, she's not going to go hanging out in the woods anytime soon. She's okay with, you know, if you're going to be outside, you need to have somebody with you, or if you're in the backyard. In the front, it's okay. It's, you know, the other houses, everybody can see everybody, that type of thing. That's fine. But she's on board with that too. So, I mean, I think it's going to be fine. I'm going to keep looking though. I'm going to keep looking around, and, you know, I have some friends that are coming over. They have night vision, and I'm thinking of pitching a tent this summer. No kids will be in the tent. It'll be adults and weapons, and, you know, we'll see. Maybe we can catch something. That would be great, and it would prove I'm not crazy.
Yeah, well, you're not crazy. Do you notice what time of year you generally have activity, or is it random?
I'm going to say it's all year long because I have been out here in February. I used to smoke, so I would never smoke in the house. I would always smoke on the deck. That's probably another reason why I'm more inclined to see things, because I'm out here all freaking hours smoking cigarettes. Not anymore. I quit. And we've had activity every month of the year, I think. You know, it's less so in the winter. In the winter, it's more like sound. But then again, we're not outside in the winter. And it seemed to be more active definitely in the fall, late summer, early fall. But we've had the tapping on the window was a springtime event. I've had wood knocks right in my backyard. That's why maybe it has nothing to do with wood. Maybe they're clapping or something like that. But right in my backyard, I had an incident where there was very loud knocking, and that was in the spring. Most of the 3 sightings I had were all in the summer. So maybe summer would be most active, but all year long there are things that do happen. So I do think they're just coming through this area regularly, going someplace, you know, maybe a field. Maybe they go into the fields for the deer or something like that, and the field's right over the river here. And we also have a defunct railroad track that runs parallel to the property that goes straight back to, the biggest state park in New Hampshire. So, that would probably make it something too. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. No, I would definitely say it. I'd love to see it from Google Earth, and just, have you ever Google Earth your place and see?
I did, and I thought about, maybe I should Google Earth it and send over the information, because it is, you can see going straight back into the next town over where the state park is. Yeah, it's like a Bigfoot Disneyland here. We have the defunct railroad track, we have cornfields, 1, 2, 3 sides of us. We've got the river, we have the swamp, we have, multiple ponds back there. So, in terms of the things they say that Bigfoot are attracted to, well, we have it all, So I guess it does kind of make sense.
Well, Carol, be safe while you're out there, and keep me up to date, will you? Let me know what's going on around the property.
I will. And once again, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the show, and thank you for, kind of giving people an outlet to talk about it. I think it's important. I hope maybe there's something that I said that can help somebody else who's sitting there thinking, I think I have something going on, but I'm not sure. I could be crazy. You may not be crazy. You may actually have something going on. I can have them here in New Hampshire. They can be anywhere.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Carol, thank you again. And if you're out there listening on iTunes, if you're out there listening on your podcast player, if you get a chance, check out SasquatchChronicles.com. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, email me, Wes@SasquatchChronicles.com.